Hello and welcome to today's training. Today's training is going to be about the poll books. My name is Amy Vanderhyde, Deputy Village Clerk. First, we're going to go over the types of poll lists. There are the regular poll list, supplemental, and election day registration, and the absentee ballot listing. The regular poll list includes all of the voters' names, addresses, ward number, and notation whether the voter has received an absentee ballot or returned one. The supplemental poll list includes anyone who registered in the clerk's office after the mail-in deadline of the 20 days before Election Day. The Election Day registration lists are those who register on Election Day, and the absentee ballot listing is used by the absentee processors at Central Count and is at the poll listing table for reference only. We would like to note, though, you really don't need to go back to the absentee poll listing, for we're printing our poll books after the deadline for returned absentees. So by that point, everything you have in the poll book is going to match that absentee log. So it is for reference only. Regular poll books. On here, you'll see in green, the first box will show this is where you write the last voter number used and the page of the last voter. You do not have to put on number of absentee electors because we now do Central Count. That will be taken care of by the Central Count location. On the bottom, you'll see that we need to have a chief inspector sign and anybody who works at the book. So we have to have a minimum of 3 signatures here. But if you work at the book at any point in time, so you're covering somebody on a break, you move to help out somewhere while a chief is filling in, please make sure if you work at a book, you sign it. So you sign when you sit. This shows a sample of the poll book. So on the top left, you're going to see the ballot styles. Some of the elections have several styles. With this one, you can see you have Menominee Falls, MF, and Hamilton, HAM, circled in red. This is how you know if you have a split ward, if you're going to be giving a voter a Menominee Falls ballot or a Hamilton ballot. Noted on the right side is the absentee issued, absentee returned, or the have you moved. These will be noted in here for if a voter has been issued a ballot but never returned, or if a voter has returned their absentee ballot before Election Day, you'll see it here. A have you moved is the ERIC voter list. If they have not moved, please have them just sign their name in the box like normal and issue them a ballot. If they have moved and you see this notation, please make sure they re-register at the registration table. This could also make them move wards if they've moved, so please make sure that you check where they need to be re-registering. Supplemental poll list. So this is the one we talked about, which is for anybody who registered after the 20-day cutoff. This will be found in the supplemental poll list tab in your binder. It is directly behind the normal poll book itself, the poll listing. You will see absentees here. You'll see people who registered and are coming in to vote. So this is no different than a regular poll listing. The Election Day registration log. So at the registration table, there are 2 stickers. They should be filling out these stickers so when they take them to the poll book, they can put them on this log. So they'll be putting their name and street address. Please make sure that these are written legibly. If it cannot be read, please rewrite it next to it so we know exactly what the address and the voter's name is. You'll give them a voter number from the voter grid or the number grid, and then they will sign just like they would a normal poll book upside down. This next slide shows what happens at the poll book table when a voter comes up. So I'm going to read the right box or the left box, and then I'll read the right. So one of the poll workers will ask the voter to state their name. They will find the name in the poll listing. They will ask the voter to state their address. They will then verify the address in the poll listing. They will check the voter's photo ID. They are checking for name and face, not address. The voter will sign the poll list and write the voter number on the poll list next to the voter's name. And then you're going to initial the ballot and give it to the other person to initial as well. After it has the 2 initials, you'll give the ballot to the voter to go vote the ballot. So while this is all happening, the second person will also find the name and address in the poll list. They will also look at the photo ID, and they'll have the grid number to assign the voter number so that you can both write it in next to the voter's name. And they'll write the poll list page number on the grid. Select the correct ward ballot and initial it and give it to the other person so you have those two initials. This process is simultaneous. Make sure you take your time. For any new workers, make sure that you understand the process and go through it slowly, and ask Chief Inspector if you have any questions. We're going to go through state show sign. So this is exactly what we want you to do at the poll book table to make sure that you're getting the information from the voter. You'll ask them to state their name. The voter is asked to state their name, and all voters must state their name unless they are a confidential voter. You will know the voter. Even if you know the voter, they still must state their name, and you must find them in the poll book. If the voter's name has changed, they will need to re-register. Once you find their name, they need to state their address. The voter is also required to state their address by state law. The poll worker must verify the address matches on the poll book. If it does not, then they need to go back and re-register at the registration table. If it is just a typo error, please note it in here so that we can change it later. Wisconsin law was amended back in November of 2019 to allow voters to have poll workers or assisters of their choosing state their name and address on their behalf prior to receiving a ballot. Poll workers or assisters may read the name and address directly from the poll book or from the photo ID provided by the voter. The voters can also provide their information in writing to a poll worker or assisters to have them read out loud. You cannot tell somebody that they are not able to do this. This is something that somebody would certify they are not able to do on their own. If a voter is not registered or is not in the poll list, be calm claim. Let me reread this. If a voter is not registered or not on the poll list and claim they should be, do not let them leave until you check with clerk services at 262-532-4200. In this case, you're also going to want to get the chief inspector. They'll be able to help the voter out more with this scenario. It could be something as simple as they are supposed to be at a different polling location. The photo ID. After you find their name and address in the poll book, then you will ask for their photo ID. The voters are required to provide this. The poll workers will verify that the name on the ID conforms to the name on the poll list. The names on the ID may be a variation of the name on the poll list, and this is still acceptable. Poll workers verify that the photo on the ID reasonably resembles the voter and is unexpired. If expired, it must meet the certain criteria we will talk about later. If the voter does not have an acceptable photo ID, the voter may have an option to vote provisionally. The photo ID does not need to include the address. If someone does not have an ID, please contact the chief inspector in case they will need to do the provisional process. With masks, we understand that it is hard to see people's faces. We do not require them to remove their face mask, so just do the best you can. Signing the poll list. After you've checked their name, address, and photo ID, every voter must sign the poll list, or the supplemental list, or the new registration list. The voter only signs one list though, so you will choose at the beginning of the day whose book is going to be the signature book. The voter not able to sign the poll list. So someone may not be able to sign the poll list themselves. In this case, two workers must determine whether the voter can sign the poll list. If the two workers determine they cannot sign the poll book, the workers must write exempt by order of inspector on the signature line. But if the voter has not signed the list because the poll workers forgot to have them sign, ask the chief inspectors to note the voter's name and number on the inspector statement. This next page is the number grid. So we start out at number 1 because of central count. We no longer have absentees on our grid, starting us at a different number. Each voter receives a number, otherwise known as a voter number. Voters get numbers sequentially starting at the number 1. Next to each number, write the page number of the voter. This will help us reconcile numbers later on after election day. In the end, the numbers of ballots cast in the voting machine must match the number given out on the number grids. Circled in green, you can see on the left-hand side, number 23, is a new registration. They get the initials NR next to the name or next to the voter number. Absentee voters at the polls. Absentee voters are prohibited from voting in person on election day if they have returned an absentee ballot either by mail or hand delivery. Voters with spoiled ballots that did not receive or return a placement ballot can vote in person at the polling place on election day. Poll workers must check for a notation on the poll list, absentee, for each voter. If the voter is an absentee voter, you can check the absentee poll list to determine the status of the absentee ballot. If the ballot was returned, then the voter cannot vote at the polling place. If the ballot was not returned, then the poll worker must ask the voter, did you mail or personally deliver your ballot to clerk services? If they say yes, they cannot vote. If they say no, they are allowed to vote. A note again is the absentee poll list does match your poll book, but it's always still good to check just to make sure. Voters are no longer able to return ballots to polling locations on election day. This is due to absentee ballots being processed at central count on election day. Absentee ballots can be returned to clerk services at the drop box until 7 p.m. or designated central count location by 8 p.m. Notify the chief inspector to assist the voter to the correct location. Issuing a ballot. The ballot has a color block unless white. Poll workers must give the voter the correct ballot based on the color of the poll list and number grid. The ballot must have the initials of 2 poll workers. Please do not initial ahead of time. You may not initial ahead of time for several reasons. The Wisconsin Election Commission does not allow for this process. Live ballot stock could be left on tables if the polling place needed to be evacuated. And if a voter was given 2 live ballots by mistake, the voter now has 2 live ballots and can put both of them into the ballot machine. Next portion of the presentation will be photo identification. Voters are required to show proof of ID in order to receive their ballot. So reviewing the photo ID, we're looking for the elector's photograph and their name and the expiration date. Remember, the photo ID does not need to include their current address, nor do you need to check the signature on the photo ID compared to the poll list. This next page was updated by WEC to show all of the acceptable photo IDs. You have Wisconsin driver's license, U.S. uniform service, U.S. passport book or card, a Wisconsin driver state ID or IDD petition process receipt, the Wisconsin state ID card, Veteran Affairs ID card, certificate of naturalization, university or college tech college ID card plus enrollment verification, or a tribal ID. This is something that you will have at your poll book table for your reference on election day. This list is a little more in depth with the proof of identification. It has all the standards that must be met. So the state of Wisconsin driver's license or instructor's permit may be revoked or suspended, unexpired or expired after 11/3 of 2020. State of Wisconsin ID card, unexpired or expired after 11/3, 2020. Military ID card issued by U.S. Uniform Service, unexpired or expired after 11/3, 2020. Military ID cards may be expired or some may indicate indefinite. Veteran Affair ID cards, unexpired or have no expiration date. A photo ID card issued by a Wisconsin accredited university or college. It must include the date it was issued, the signature of the student, and have been expired date no later than 2 years after the date of issuance. They must also include a second document, which can be a tuition fee receipt, enrollment verification letter, or class schedule. U.S. passport booklet or card, unexpired or expired after 11/3, 2020. Certificate of naturalization, unexpired or issued not earlier than 2 years before the election. The Wisconsin DOT driving receipt, unexpired or valid for 45 days from issuing. Wisconsin DOT ID receipt, unexpired or valid for 45 days from issuing. An ID card issued by a federally recognized Wisconsin tribe. It can be either expired or unexpired. The Wisconsin DMV IDPP receipt, temporary process, which is on election day, valid for 60 days, or the Wisconsin DMV IDPP receipt, the conventional one, is valid for 45 days. Citation or notice to revoke or suspend a Wisconsin driver's license. This needs to be unexpired and dated within 60 days of the election. And a state of Wisconsin ID card with no photograph. This is issued to electors with a religious objection and must be unexpired or expired after 11/3/2020. Note that confidential voters will bring in their own confidential voter card with their number on it. They do not need to show a photo ID or state their name and address. This next slide is the IDPP petition process document. This is in the Chief Inspector binder and must be given out to any voter without a photo ID present on election day wishing to vote. This will help them go to their local DMV and get an ID for a purpose of the election only. Thank you so much for watching the video, and please make sure to watch all additional videos and view all additional documents.